Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Got a few. Had a number of ancestors fight on both sides during the American Revolution and in the American Civil War. The only story from this far back is from the Civil War. One of my many great-uncles had enlisted in the Confederate Army, but he was really short, somewhere between 4 and 5 feet tall when he was an adult. The story goes he was in formation for review by General Jackson, and when Jackson rode past, he saw my uncle and thought he was a little kid. Jackson stopped his horse and refused to believe my uncle's sergeant that he was really an adult, and made my uncle remove his hat and pull on his beard to prove it was real. Jackson then stated that he was surely the shortest man in the entire Confederate Army, and likely in any army in the world. At least that is the story the old people handed down. More recently, my great-great-uncle on my mom's side was in World War I, killed a German by crushing his face with a rock in a trench raid, then got gassed somewhere in France. Family said he never smiled again after he got home from the war, not because he was traumatized, but because his face was mostly paralyzed. He had seizures too. We assume it was nerve damage from phosgene or something like that, or maybe he was exposed to some sort of early nerve agent. He died in early 50s, but was an all-around solid dude, according to the family. Both my grandfathers were in World War II, one in Europe and one in Japan. Mom's dad was older and enlisted in '42, spent the war in tanks in Europe under Patton. He had 19 tanks and tank destroyers destroyed under and around him, and was the sole survivor of 14 of these, not sure if he was lucky or cursed. After the war, he had his own bedroom that was locked at night, or else he would get up and try to kill Grandma in his sleep. Stayed in the Army his whole life. Commanded tanks in Korea, then died of a heart attack right before he got sent to Vietnam. Never talked about it, but we assume he either really liked killing or wanted to die, or maybe both, since he always sought combat deployments the second there was a war to go to. My other grandfather was younger, enlisted in late '44 and completed MP training just in time to occupy Nagasaki. Was in the first wave of guys there, saw some fucked up shit in the aftermath of the bomb, and ended up being rather sympathetic towards the defeated Japanese. He was from an old Confederate family from Mississippi, who still had very strong sentiments about decorum and behavior, a holdover from being plantation owners descended from French knights. He was responsible for weapons turn-ins, and was the only enlisted man who saluted Japanese officers when they turned in their swords. A Japanese equivalent to a colonel saw this, cut through the line of other Japanese officers, returned my grandfather's salute, then bowed and presented him his pair of swords. Grandfather thought this was cool, claimed the swords as his war trophies, and took them home to East Tennessee. Grandfather died when he was about 38, but looked like he was about 80 at the time. Everyone assumes it was from radiation exposure in Nagasaki. The swords then sat in a closet until the late 90s, when my dad got them from his mom and did some research. Turns out they were Sengoku-era samurai swords from about 1480, made by a smith named Masahiro Fujiwara, who was famous enough in his own times that Japanese smiths 200 years later were using his name as a trademark indicating quality. That grandfather's future brother-in-law, my great-uncle, was in the army and fought in North Africa and Italy. He was in England on his way there and spent a couple weeks chilling in London before going to Africa. The night before he shipped out, he got wasted with a friend and 3 British girls, who convinced the 2 of them to come back to their house after bars closed. It was way out in the country. The cab dropped them off. They spent the rest of the night drinking. Next morning he wakes up, still drunk, to find he's miles from where he was supposed to be, no phone in the house to call a cab, and he is about to miss the ship and get hit with desertion charges. He and his buddy run 4 miles to the nearest little town. A pair of bobbies try to arrest them for disorderly conduct and public drunkenness. They beat the hell out of the bobbies, steal their bicycles, and make it back just in time to get on the ship. Once he got to Africa, he spent most of his time repairing tank engines and saw a little combat. He fought against Germans, Vichy French, and their Arab auxiliaries, and bitterly hated all 3 groups until the day he died. He participated in the invasion of Italy and added Italians to his growing list of people he hated, and was field promoted to sergeant at the wise old age of 19 due to casualties. When they were in Pisa on his 20th birthday, he and his buddies decided to go see the Leaning Tower. There was an Italian policeman there who tried to stop them from going in, so my uncle cocked his Thompson submachine gun, pointed it at the policeman, and began counting down from 10 in Italian. When he got to 6, the policeman put his hands up and ran away. They went into the tower, climbed up to the top, and decided to ring the bell. There was no rope to ring it with, so they took turns blasting the bell with the Thompson to make it ring until they got bored and decided to go loot some booze from the locals. The military police grandfather had a sister. She flew Corsairs and later P-38S from the factory to the bases in California to go to the Pacific Theater. She and the other girls would fly the planes out, spend the night in San Diego or LA. I don't remember which one she said it was. Then got a bus back to the factory the next day. The fighter planes didn't have enough room in the cockpit to take anything with them other than their parachutes, and a few small items that would fit in a pocket. But they realized that the cells in the wings where ammo for the machine guns would go were empty. She said they would each pack a cocktail dress, underwear, stocking, and a single heel in one wing, and a clutch purse, makeup, a nice bra, and the other heel in the other wing. They all changed when they landed, then spent the night partying with sailors and Marines on shore leave. After the war, she married the uncle who shot the bell.
Even fighters had small luggage compartments.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they put stuff in the wings. Maybe they weren't supposed to take personal items and were smuggling them. She never said, and she passed in '01, so I can't really ask her. I also have an uncle who was in intelligence during Desert Storm and later rode around on Air Force One with the president. But he's not allowed to tell us details about what he did. He did once say he was responsible for a briefcase, so we assume he carried the nuclear football, or maybe it was just full of cash to give foreign officials.
My grandpa ran over an Italian in a tank destroyer in World War II. Also was half-Indian, and Germans would walk up to him after the war and ask if he hunted buffalo and funny shit like that. His brother was a B-17 pilot and got shrapnel in his ass. Great-grandpa on the other side had a cool story about mortaring a bunch of coconut trees that they thought Japanese snipers were hiding in. Uncle fought in Afghanistan and won't talk much about it. My paternal grandpa fought in Korea and also doesn't talk much about it.
My family has a really long tradition of service to the United States, but it actually began well before the founding of our country and can be traced back almost 1,000 years. One of my favorite stories is that of a direct relative who earned the nickname Divulsion. It may have also actually been his name. We've not really been able to sort that out. Long story short, Divulsion was a major commissioned by the New England Confederation to train and lead troops during King Philip's War. We believe that before this, he was an officer with the English regulars who was, for whatever reason, tasked to support the Confederation. He supported or led various raids, including serving under Governor Josiah Winslow in displacing and massacring the Narragansetts in 1675. However, his most interesting story comes about when he is tasked with leading a detachment to subjugate territory that the Wabanakis held in what is today Maine. After leading his unit north, a deep winter took hold, and he and his men were forced to entrench a position and withstand the Wabanaki siege throughout the winter of 1675 to 1676. This was done on the promise that the New England Confederation would send relief forces to aid my ancestor and help protect settlers in southern Maine. Unfortunately, relief forces never arrived. We don't know exactly how Divulsion and some of his remaining men escaped the siege, but he was able to return south and convince Richard Waldron and Charles Frost to lead a larger expedition north. We don't know exactly what happened to Divulsion at this point. He may have been relieved of duty due to his failures, or he may have been reassigned to work on the southern front. From then, he lived about another 30 years, dying in the first decade of the 18th century after having had a bunch of kids and doing unclear things. Comically enough, one of his grandchildren served as an officer under Monckton in the French and Indian War and fought in the same part of the world.
My great-granddad was in the Arab Intelligence Bureau with Lawrence of Arabia, and we think he was a spy during the Second World War because he spent a lot of time in Portugal and could speak German. Portugal was a popular tourist spot for German soldiers on leave. He got some high French civilian award after he hosted the French president and King George V at Covent Garden in 1938. He was the manager there. Grandad missed out on World War II by like 2 weeks or something, but he was in one of the first Royal Air Force squadrons to modernize into the Meteor. Dad used to sit on the Defense Committee of the House of Clerks and flew over Iraqi airspace during the Gulf War, and one of their fighter escorts got a missile lock. He also went to a Christmas party in the Pentagon and oversaw some of the processes involved in the Eurofighter coming online. He didn't do anything, he just helped push the papers for the MPs.
The only great-grandfather I know anything about was a skilled machinist who made artillery during World War I, worked in different factories on the East Coast after the war, lost everything in the Depression except for his Ford. Managed to con his way across the country by shining up the cars of country rubes with gasoline for a quarter. Made enough to keep his family alive and gas in the car till they made it to California. His son, my paternal grandfather, was in Korea in the infantry. Only story he ever told was that it rained constantly, and they got so sick of it that he and a buddy ended up asking a supporting Sherman to park over top of them for the night to give them a roof for a few hours. The tank sank in the mud overnight, and they had to dig their way out. My dad was in Vietnam. Said he spent his whole military career on various tenders and intel boats running out of Subic and Pearl. One time, though, he got very drunk and told me a different story about being an engine man in the Brown Water Navy, burning vills and going rock and roll on VC. I don't know which one is true, and he's getting so old now I don't want to bring it up. I saw him once when we were visiting his second wife's family in the Philippines, though, when a couple Philippine Army Hueys went overhead and he hopped into the bush and started freaking out because he had lost his rifle. Took me a while to calm him down. Same look in his eye that I had seen on a lot of dudes from my own time in the service after some heavy shit happened. My maternal grandfather is maybe the funniest one. He was a West Point grad in the 50s. Applied to be a fighter pilot but got sidelined into cargo flights. Flew various types of cargo into Central and South America. Basically, wherever there was a good coup or rebel group to be found. While he was married and respectable back in the States, he was apparently quite the womanizer when on assignment down south. We found this out because he fathered a number of children, who have since moved to the US and taken those genetic tests for the purpose of genealogy. That connected them with my mother, who was happy to find out she had half-siblings, but angry that her dad was apparently bending over every Latina he could get his hands on in between cocktails and gun running for the company.
Grandpa, on my dad's side, was unequivocally based. High school dropout. Joined the Air Force, served in Korea loading ordnance onto planes, apparently also genie rockets in case the Cold War went nuclear. Transfers to the Coast Guard after a while. Goes to Vietnam as a coastie somehow. He never talked about it to me, but all his buddies I met before they all got old say he was a hero for some of the things he did. Gets out of Vietnam, stays in Coast Guard for a while, retires after his 20 years. Works as a Department of Energy security guard at a nuclear power plant for several years. Assembled missiles for Martin Marietta. Eventually became a mailman out of boredom and finally retired for good once he started having grandkids. I miss the old man. He had a shitload of complications later in life. Apparently he was all over where they sprayed that Agent Orange shit and spent the last few years fighting the VA to acknowledge it. Diabetes, 2 types of cancers, strokes, blood coagulation issues. Nasty shit. I choose to remember him in a good light and leave you with a pic I like of him from Osan, Korea sometime in the late 1950s.
The Duel of the Liners, one of the greatest military sea stories. September 1914. World War I has kicked off. The German Imperial Navy and British Royal Navy have pressed their ocean liners into service. The large liners, like RMS Olympic, are to become hospital and troop ships, but the mid-size liners have another task. They are to become hunters of their own kind. Under conditions of high secrecy, the RMS Carmania, a cunarder of 19,500 register tons, is taken from her civilian service. In a secluded berth, Her luxurious fittings are stripped and put into storage. Her sparkling white superstructure is hastily painted grey-black to disappear against the night sky. 8 4.7-inch naval guns are installed aboard and concealed by tarpaulins and trapdoors. Her civilian crew and officer corps is augmented with a crack team of Royal Navy men. Every spare inch of space aboard is stocked with food, fresh water, ammunition, and coal. Where she is going, there will be no resupply. Finally, her orders are delivered. She is to sail to the coast of Brazil, where German gunboats and colliers have been supporting the operations of an as-yet unknown armed merchantman. This enemy threatens to cut off trade with South America, and perhaps even the United States, should she move north. She is to flush out this merchantman, engage her, sink her, burn her, or take her a prize. Meanwhile, at the Brazilian island of Trindade, SMS Cap Trafalgar, a servant of the Kaiser, is also being transformed. Her third funnel is taken off, and the remaining painted in Cunard crimson and black. Her superstructure is touched up and cleaned of coal dust. She is made to look like an English ocean liner in the best of conditions, so as to fool Allied vessels into approaching. Specifically, she is being made to look like the RMS Carmania, a ship almost exactly Trafalgar's size and well known by most English sailors. The 14th of September. After steaming at top speed across the Atlantic, the now HMS Carmania approaches the remote island of Trindade. Smoke curls up from the outcrop of land. Coal smoke. Carmania's captain orders her to approach the island's sole harbour. The crew of the anchored Cap Trafalgar watches in horror as an all-black, soot-streaked ghost of a liner emerges from the early morning fog and into their midst. For a moment, silence reigns over all involved attempts to identify friend or foe. One of Carmania's lookouts spies the name of his own ship, lettered on the stern of the liner at anchor. This can mean only one thing. In a flash, Carmania's crew rips the tarps and drops the concealing doors from her mounted guns. But her captain fears being trapped in the harbour, a location surely known to the other German gunboats, and orders full astern while the crew fire at the imposter ship. Clearing the harbour, Carmania turns hard and goes full ahead, making for open water. Cap Trafalgar does the same minutes later as her crew, shaken from a period of R&R, prepares her weaponry. On both ships, watertight doors slam closed in preparation for what is certain to come. The ships sail away from each other as wireless operators tap out coded messages to their respective commands. With several miles between them, both captains decide they are done with running. Carmania fired first, but was out of range. Cap Trafalgar makes a more calculated shot, damaging Carmania's superstructure and starting fires that would burn out of control for the rest of the engagement. Both captains decide they must now close in for the kill. As they near each other, the fire grows far more accurate. Carmania takes 79 rounds from Cap Trafalgar's 4.1-inch guns. She returns nearly the same to Cap Trafalgar. Nevertheless, her bridge is now shot away. Both ships are burning and listing, but they continue to close, with Carmania being commanded from her docking bridge aft, as most of her upper decks are consumed by flame. Cap Trafalgar looks to be in better shape, with fewer fires and an intact bridge, but unlike the Brit, she has been holed badly below the waterline. Carmania's gunners had prioritized the Germans' hull, at the expense of taking out the gun crews that threatened to kill them at any moment. Running short of ammunition, and with their barrels glowing red-hot, the main deck guns are retired. Small arms, pistols, revolvers, Lewis and Maxim guns, and swords are distributed to the crews. Finally, the ships come to a stop. There are less than 300 yards between them. For several hours, the crews exchange gunfire until even this ammunition is nearly depleted. By now, the ship's decks are strewn with corpses. Carmania has burned almost to the waterline in some places. Nevertheless, her turbines turn unabated, driving pumps that bring her list under control. The Carmania's captain is faced with a choice: stop fighting, possibly surrender, and save his ship from fire by directing all the crewmen to damage control, or keep fighting and allow much of the crew below decks to burn or suffocate. A store of powder ignites, sending a fireball raking Carmania's topside. Now, it seems he has but one option. Without warning, something inside the Cap Trafalgar finally gives way. She heels hard to port, her list out of control as shell holes all along her body become openings for the sea. She sinks in minutes. Carmania, suddenly the victor, sets about saving herself while the colliers that had attended Cap Trafalgar in port pluck German sailors from the sea. In the final tally, 51 Germans, including Cap Trafalgar's captain, and 9 British sailors were dead. Carmania limped to safety, was rebuilt, served at Gallipoli, and returned to civil service, being scrapped in 1932 at the age of 27. The end.
My great-granduncle on my father's side was in the Finnish Civil War on the white side, took part in executions of Reds, but the one thing he's most remembered for in my family was that he fiddled with a pistol in his pocket and shot himself in the thigh, nearly dying from blood loss as a result. The war was over at that point. Dunno if he actually did it to get out of firing squad duties, or if it was a genuine accident. His brother, my great-grandfather, missed the Civil War, because although he was the older brother, their father guilted him into staying at the family farm to take care of his younger siblings and ailing mother. He tried to get to the front in the Winter War, but as a member of the local White Guards, he was made responsible for some air defense duties and missed the war. When the Continuation War began, he finally managed to get himself mobilized into the army, despite being a farmer, a father of 4, and in his early 40s. He served in the supply troops, and like 2 months into the war, he was caught in an artillery strike and got his back peppered by shell fragments. That was the end of his war. The doctors never got all of the shrapnel out of him, and he was an invalid for the rest of his life, lived to be 90-something. My great-grandfather on my mother's side was a medic NCO in the Winter War and Continuation War. Said he only ever used his rifle to put down wounded horses, but supposedly he once drunkenly admitted to my uncle that he put down at least 2 badly wounded Soviet POWs and gave a badly wounded Finnish soldier a pistol, knowing that he would use it to off himself.
Pop-Paw joined the Navy to be an aviator in the 50s. He's deaf in one ear from when his father hit him in the head so hard he ruptured his eardrum as a child. Cheats on every hearing test by memorizing the hand waves of the guy in front of him. Gets caught by a doctor right before he actually gets to go to flight school. The Navy makes him a non-rate but still lets him near aviation. Gets stationed at Walker Air Base in Roswell, New Mexico. Said it was sweet. He drove a tractor to tow airplanes into their hangars and to the flight lines. He'd get off work at 4 every day and would meet a QT at the local diner and would get a burger, shake and fries for 2 quarters. One day is going long. Speeds up to finish work. He's going like 14 miles per hour instead of 9 like he's supposed to. Chief dresses him down when he gets done. Says the planes can generate lift at 12 miles per hour. Taken off duty, sent to the meteorology school. Pop-Paw is a weather savant, like he does this shit better than anyone. A computer model can't beat his calculations until 2010. Since he's so hot shit, they put him on a counter-submarine task force. They have him mark on a map where he would hide subs. They had him doing this for 4 years. They'd just drop depth charges and mine the areas he marked. They never told me outright if I was right, but a chief sent me some photographs of chunks of metal that floated to the surface. Gets stressed out and decides to not re-up and goes to work for the National Weather Service. Joins the National Weather Service. He's sailing around South America on a research ship. The National Weather Service then says they have a special assignment for him. He gets put on some island that apparently formed from bird shit. There's a CIA broadcast station and Cuba is over the horizon. He's just a weatherman. Briefs the CIA chief every day on their forecasts. Bay of Pigs invasion is imminent. Commanders meet on the island to get their weather brief from Pop-Paw LMAO. It fails. Gets sent back to the research ship. Does a few trips to Antarctica and the Arctic. Pulls ice cores to analyze global temperature trends. They're missing a few 100,000s of years of data.
Scientists at the main lab just jam all the charts together to make a single line. This is where the theory of global warming comes from. Pop-Paw became the very first climate change denier.
First ancestor in Canada wins land for fighting in the Peninsular Campaign in the Napoleonic Wars. Possibly fought in the War of 1812 as well, though there's no records I could find. Grandson moves to Saskatchewan. One of his sons died at Vimy Ridge in World War I. Other son is my great-grandfather. My grandpa enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force at 16, lied about age. Bomber Command. Was a tail gunner in a Lancaster bomber. Was present at Dresden. War in Europe finishes. Switches to the Army and does paratrooper training. Preparing for invasion of Japan until the nukes drop. Serves another 2 years in the Canadian Navy after the war. Military tells him to finish high school. Offered free university education and a program to become an officer. Says no and becomes an alcoholic doing various resource extraction jobs in Western Canada for the rest of his life. Dad joined the Canadian military at 17. Goes to Royal Roads and is an officer in the Navy for 11 years. Only deployment was Haiti and anti-piracy in the Caribbean and South Pacific. Ends up working high-tech the rest of his life.
Be great-grandfather, just a teenage Irish boy, arrested and given the choice between starving to death in prison or being given a new name and signing up for World War I. Suffer constant abuse, undergo mental breakdown in trenches and develop religious psychosis. Carve crucifixes into everything and believes God will come to earth and drown all soldiers in an ocean of blood. Recover a little and get involved in the IRA. Goes on an arms-buying trip to Germany. Trades explosives to Zentrum supporters who have contacts in the Abwehr. Later breaks with the IRA over political differences. Tells his sons nothing of the war. Be great, uncle. Dad is a crazy, abusive, and hardcore combat veteran. World War II kicks off. Immediately sign up. Dad freaks out and runs away before he can do anything crazy. Fight in North Africa. Think war's actually fucking cool. Get captured in Tobruk. Spend months as a POW. Learn German and Italian just to insult captors. Italians just abandon post one night and everyone slips away. Get redeployed to Europe. Have an affair with a French girl. Go back to France immediately after the war. Bring her and her bastard son back home. Already agreed to marry a girl from his hometown and sticks to it. Becomes a mine foreman so he can afford 2 houses. Keeps his wife and 4 kids in one. Keeps his mistress and 2 bastards in the one next door. No one ever makes a big deal of this. The 2 women remain firm friends until their dying days. Be dad. Fight in Vietnam. Join as a 6'3" hippie beanpole and forced to carry ammo for the M60. Get into constant firefights throughout deployment. Never lose a friend. Come home jacked from doing daily calisthenics and sprints carrying 60 kilos. Immediately join a biker gang and arrested. Given the option of joining up again or going to jail. Goes to jail. Gets out and goes back home to work the same mine as his father and grandfather. Be me. Join the army for a free engineering degree. Go to Iraq and don't suffer at all.
Great-grandpa, German tanker, was a leather worker. We owned a trade shop and hobby videograph. He fought on the East Front immediately since he was basically snatched out of his shop and trained in a rather short time. He took around 25 hours of video material across Russia and a vacation in occupied France later on. After returning, he was almost immediately captured since they got immobilized with no outside support. He died in captivity somewhere around 47, reasons unknown. After the fall of the Soviet Union, we got contacted by a random Polish man who bought his entire kit and belongings at auction. He sold us the video and his watch back for the price he paid for everything, so a good deal for that guy. The videos are in the public domain. Good chance you have seen stuff in documentaries before. It's free to use. We also still have a tape of him with some French prostitute. We didn't donate that.
Be me growing up. Old man Herb neighbor who talked with a German accent. Would often tell stories of his youth. Be Herb. Always loved airplanes as a kid. Used to work at Junkers factory at the age of 14 during World War II. Got drafted in late 44. Fought on the Western Front. War ended in a French POW camp. French passively torturing the POWs. Sleep deprivation, starvation, demoralization, etc. The French would have food on a table in the middle of the camp every day, but the catch was signing up for the French Foreign Legion. Many POWs gave in, finally decided to escape. Plan it out with 3 others. Somehow actually escape and all go separate ways. Run into an old farmer within 5 minutes of escaping. Farmer decides to help because his son and grandson were missing soldiers. Start working on a farm right next to the camp. Plow fields day after day. Feel bad for the POWs. Sneak to the camp at night to give food to the POWs. Do this a couple times. One of the POWs tells the frogs for good boy points. Caught by the frogs next night. Forced to sign into the French Foreign Legion. Spend 2 to 4 years fucking around in the Legion. Hate every second of it, looking for a way out. Eventually sent to French Indochina. Horrid combat. Stories of German Legion guys defecting. Really want to, but he hates commies. Go AWOL, spend 5 weeks working way south, eventually found passage on a trade junk going to British Malaya. After weeks, find work on a merchant ship in Malaya. 3 years sailing the globe, end up in Mexico, sneak into Texas, find a job at a German-owned business, marry a Texan girl, actually get nationalized, move to Fort Worth to pursue his childhood dream, airplanes, apply to Convair and literally put Junkers Wehrmacht French Foreign Legion on resume, hired on the spot. Retired from General Dynamics as an F-16 project manager in the mid-90s. Every year since US nationalization would send a postcard to the French Foreign Legion to tell them to get fucked.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.